Welcome to History, His Story 26, Imagineering the Future. This one resonates a little bit to 6, which I identified as the next big thing, the engine. The engine started the Industrial Revolution about 400 years ago. I'm not going to talk a lot about the engine, but many of you have heard about the new revolution, the new information economy. There is a new revolution going on in technology and information revolution. And within the context of economics, your economics are turning inside out. Your whole construct of economics, built upon the concept of, well, the worker and the owner, will lose sight of the rise of a new class where there are more consumers in our society than there are either workers or owners, unless we change the paradigm, which is part of my story. How do we change the paradigm to one where we own the world together? Which is one of the questions I asked many years ago. What if we owned our world together? So let's get to the start of the story and the end of the story, or the story of the story. And it's sort of a strange story, because when I conceived the story, well, what was the story? Okay. Many of you have probably seen many versions of Hollywood shows imagineering Armageddon. Now, or some facsimile thereof of the deconstruction and destruction of human civilization. But how many of you imagine what lies beyond that? What allows us to achieve justice and peace on earth? How many of you have an imagined, how do we get to like that area of Star Trek? And maybe even with peace in the universe, but let's just start with the world. So the question is, has anybody imagined that fantasy story? And I don't think so. But when I imagined that fantasy story, I realized this story could be made in the context of our own reality. Now, in your net present reality, which I must accept is my net present reality, I'm just a crazy or wacko guy on a YouTube. Now, that very well may be the case. However, even if it may be the case, if I speak the truth and my ideas are sound, it doesn't matter the source, does it? If it is your future, or your best possible facsimile of a future. And that's what I postulated. If you put your heads together, we could create a better future together. Now, so what is this? Well, okay, so it was like an apocalypse. Not the apocalypse you think about, but a revelation. A revelation of new economics, a revelation of why our economic structure is designed to fail, built on like a myriad of debts and banks and nations, and how by deconstructing the debts and banks and nations and recreating a single global world bank backed by the resources of the world, the oil, the gold, the minerals, all of it, we could connect to a single reserve currency tied to a global enterprise structure, which I described before, and I won't go into details now. I call it People of Earth.biz. But if imagine we owned our global enterprise together, we allowed them to compete with each other, but at the end of the day, we had stock of the enterprise, and, well, we had the people's best interest in mind, because the people were both our consumers, our customers, and our shareholders. Now, that's a different concept of economics than what you have. Now, how do we get from that to, like, okay, first thing is the only way it makes sense to buy the world for the people. I wouldn't want to own the world unless we could achieve justice, peace, and earth. We actually couldn't even achieve this construct of a trust, because it's a trust to get to and achieve a single global currency and open up global markets and achieve a 99-year plan for the world, not just a haphazard plan for nations that doesn't take into account the variables, well, we don't even need to go into global climate change. But if we own the world and its resources together, would we not make better decisions? Would we not say, well, you know what, we might want to leave more coal in the ground for now, exploit these other resources, and when we find clean gold, bring it out, or whatever we can choose, because we would be managing the global interests across all of these sectors. Now, it doesn't mean there wouldn't be stress and strife. Okay, but part of it is we need to take a global scale of the problem. Okay, and part of it is we need to get rid of governments and nations. Now, how do you do that? Well, it's okay. It's sort of simple, but like imagine the governments, the communist governments, and those state-owned governments turn their resources over to an enterprise and said, in effect, I'm going to give you a third of my nation. So China says, I'm going to give the world a third of my enterprise, our enterprise of the Chinese enterprise, and in exchange, I'm going to get a third of the action of the rest of the world. And so we are vested in our own enterprises together, and we're vested in the rest of the world together. And, well, there's new economic constructs. For example, within the technology construct, see, this is the thing that is different. We now have the technology to directly connect an enterprise to every person on Earth. And we have the technology to, rather than just proliferate information, which is going to be the problem, to start to identify truths that we can agree to, standards that can help people, products that, well, deliver more value. Because when you get to the economics of this whole prosperity thing, when you get down to it, well, by the way, why we need to buy all the resources of the world is we're going to grow the world, we're going to build it out like you wouldn't believe, which will drive the prices of all these commodities up, because it'll drive up the inherent demand. However, when that is driven up, our profits are going to our bank, as we already bought them ahead of time, because we knew we were going to buy the world. See, and that's where it gets to like a conspiracy to buy the world was sort of the screen plan. I call it the screen plan because I could never write this plan. Imagine a plan written 7 years ago with a crazy old guy on YouTube crazily sending out messages that you think are ignored, but in fact are followed. And the leaders of nations start getting together behind the scenes and saying, yes, we have a path to creating a new global enterprise, and that can secure a better future for all the children of all the people of all the nations. That is an interesting truth and paradigm. It won't work without the next. Because how do you possibly explain to people how we could achieve like a virtual heaven on earth by providing healthcare and housing and food to people, by putting the people at the top of our economic pyramid? How could you possibly explain a monetary system with an inherent calm and safety net built in? Well, it is trickle-up economics and a super reserve currency. When you combine the two, I don't think you can find a way when our bank is way too big to fail. Why? Because it's the bank of us. But anyway, that's not entirely important, but it is important, because once we have a common bank of us and common open global markets and are working towards a common advancement of prosperity for all people will advance. But will advance to this new state of an information economy, a state where the person is connected to the enterprise, and with information technology that will sort of blow your mind. But let's get back to one paradigm of this. It's a story you would all write together. You see, that's why I never wrote that story. I got Spielberg and Cameraman and Lucas and Gibson and all those guys, Clint Eastwood, and you name them, as the directors of the future of Earth. But that didn't stop there. Every country and every nation. This would be a movie with paradigms and paradoxes occurring all over the place as people are struggling to see themselves towards this new future together and cross the chasm of this domain. Now, it gets biblical because how do you explain it? And well, that's where I thought it got biblical because you see, if you were simply came up with a notion, which I tried to come up with a notion to explain it, that we were designed to learn one lesson: not to kill, not to war, and to be just. And it's taken us a long time because we weren't designed to do it until we had the power that we have now to disintermediate all powers and to create virtual power of all people and a virtual power under God. But which God? What God? Who is God? And that's where it gets interesting. If we were made in the image of God, then man was designed to become God. How does man design to become God? Well, I don't think in modern day times the answer is to go unto the Christ cross. That was done as a message for us, of course. But what we do is we fly our camel to the near side and we see the power of one world enterprise together, and we realize one thing: we're all working for the same God. He gave us different information. It was all part of our software code. He gave us the power to learn and to discover truth. And by the way, if there is a path to creating a next level of human existence where humanity is advanced with peace and prosperity, and we advance the state of knowledge and learning and information. You see, the economics of information are different than the economics of revolutionary industrial revolutions, because this information revolution, which is more than an information revolution, it's a truth revolution. You see, there's a lot more to it than that, because it changes the dynamics of power, but what is the truth becomes very important. And if we were designed to save ourselves through this revelation, what we designed to do, to achieve peace, to turn the other cheek, to end war, for, because this is the story from the biblical context, from one paradigm, and it's not all, but he will rebuke many nations. But you've been rebuking yourselves all along. You don't need me to do that. He will judge among the nations. I could judge you, but it's really a judgment that we're all in this together. And if you do the calculations together, you are determined that if we buy and recapitalize the entire planet, we can capitalize resources that are not on a balance sheet now, and we can build a beautiful future for all of humanity. Tell me why we can't. And if you can't, then why is that not on the table to discuss? Well, we are fighting for the right to the left, but guess what? When you fight for the right to the left, it really becomes the same one. It's the same circle, the same sphere, the same world of us. And that's the message. And see, that's the God in this truth. And I would articulate that even for those who would be atheists among you, even for those who see I brand as the epitome of your Pope, that the true Pope of the atheist church is, thus speaks Zarathustra, man becoming in the image of God, which means greed for people, not for people. But anyway, long story short, it also means a better and more prosperous world from the top to the bottom. And see, that's just simple binary logic. Thank you.